Hello, and welcome to In Focus, a Vodcast series where we're going to spotlight some of the interesting people here at RIT NTID. I'm your host, Blake Nitko. Today, we are joined by a very special guest. Our guest today is Dr. Caroline Solomon. Carrie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
We're happy to have you here with us. Carrie, to start off today, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your education, and we'll go from there.
Really, I've been in the field for over 25 years now. And really, I'm a biological oceanographer because I love the water. It really started because I was a swimmer. And when I was in high school, my family was living on a creek. And of course, I liked to jump in the water. And then there was one day that I wasn't allowed to do so because they said that it was polluted. And I remember being so upset. And from that day forward, I was committed to doing something about it. So ever since, that's what I've done. I went to college, I majored in environmental science and public policy, and later leaned more to the scientific side of things. But my whole career has been about scientific research, and I love teaching. One thing that I've loved about my job for all of these years is that nothing has to be the same. I'm teaching in the classroom, I'm out in the lab, I'm in the field, and going back and forth. And now as president, the same thing will be true. I'll be doing different things, learning from different people, and not 2 days will ever be the same. So I'm excited to be here.
Sounds like an incredible journey so far, and I'm glad you've ended up here with us. Would you say as a deaf scientist, that has influenced your path through higher education?
I think many of us have the same experience at NTID. We value the students, their growth, their journey. And so as I have moved up into different levels, there have been different levels of impact. You know, in the classroom, you have one level of impact. As an administrator, you have a different level of impact. And now as president, I'll have an even different level of impact. And I'm really looking forward to what I can do as president for deaf and hard of hearing people across the globe.
I love to see your passion for teaching. Tell me more about where that comes from. I understand you're from a family of educators, so tell me a bit more about them.
I grew up with a father who was a professor of economics at University of Delaware. He was so good at figuring out ways to do research projects in different countries. And in the later parts of his career, I don't think he was at the University of Delaware much. He was in Bulgaria, he was in all of the different stands, Kazakhstan, Afghanistan, Uzbekistan, and his discipline was looking into how the economy has changed after a breakdown. So after the tearing down of a wall, the Berlin Wall. I loved seeing his ability to satisfy his different curiosities. I liked that, and my brother actually did the same thing. And he's now a law school professor at the University of Memphis. So the three of us are academics. My mother, not so much, but at the same time, she was also very curious. Her background was in social work. Then she moved in the state government. Then she actually became the vice president of General Dynamics. At the end of her career, she worked with refugees, and she did a lot of exciting work there too. So I think the whole family has that natural curiosity, wanting to try new things, asking a variety of questions. It's just a part of us.
Inbuilt to who you are. I love that. So, you spoke a lot about your brother and your parents. Tell me a bit more about your husband. Children, any pets?
My husband is Barry Solomon, and he's an attorney, and he also works at the National Institute of Health. He works in procurement, doing federal regulations and things like that. We have 2 children. One is a high school freshman. Her name is Hannah. And then I also have a high school junior, Eli. Really, his name is Elliot, but we call him Eli for short. Both of them are currently playing soccer, but really, they have varied interests. My daughter is more into crafts. She's very creative, while my son is more analytical. If you ask him to name any soccer player who has played in the World Cup, he knows it. He has those analytical skills. They're very different. We also have a COVID puppy. His name is Finn. He's an Aussie doodle. And really, I love him. He's smart. He has so much energy, just like me, that level of energy bouncing off the walls.
Do you think your kids are going to go into academics like you did? Or they'll break the mold?
Well, first of all, every person decides their future. So I'll be curious to see what happens in the coming years. Eli has started looking at colleges now, and I'll be interested to see which ones he finds fascinating, what field he might be interested in. Right now, of course, just like any other typical high school kid, you ask him and his answer is, I don't know. And we get students here that are the same in their freshman year.
Well, thank you for sharing. Next, I'd love to dive into your thoughts about NTID. What inspired you to join us, and what do you think your first year is going to look like? What are your priorities?
As a scientist, I've always admired NTID. Always. And also RIT as a whole. And I've always had a connection with both NTID and RIT. For example, RIT, I've done a lot of grant work with over the years. I've been able to interact with professors from statistics, engineering, etc. And for NTID, I've been invited to present in different capacities over the years, and I've always appreciated the people here. So that's really the reason why I was interested in coming in the first place. You also asked about what I envision, and I would say one thing is right now I'm calling it my listening and learning era. I'm listening to what the community wants to tell me. And I need to do that before I can come up with a vision. Because as a leader, it's important to understand what's happening on the ground to get support from the folks on the ground who are doing that work every day and use that to create the vision. So I'm doing that now. I'm listening, learning, trying to put the different pieces of the puzzle together. And I think in a year, I'll be able to tell you what to look forward to moving forward.
We'll have to have you back on next time for an update.
Yes, please do.
So tell me a bit about your first few weeks here. Do you have any stories you'd like to share?
I think there have been a lot of moments where they've really just been heartfelt. For example, let's see, when I talk to people at RIT, they keep telling me about how NTID is such a gem and how really special we are to them. And they really want to make sure that we're spotlighting NTID. So really, I've gotten those genuine sentiments about NTID from the RIT community. And also, of course, my nerd side has been appearing often. For example, last week I went to the sustainability building. They have their green wall, and it just felt so great. Or going into labs or getting tours of the engineering lab. There have just been different things that are so exciting. There's new equipment and instruments and students, and honestly, even just bumping into students too, having them tell me about what they're doing, what they're excited about, even just saying hello. All of those have been great over the last few weeks.
As they say, we're always on to something here at RIT. There seems to be something happening on campus at all times. It's a very vibrant culture. I'm glad you've got to see that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now that you've gotten to know NTID a bit more, are there any traditions you're looking forward to being a part of?
Well, we just finished Applefest, and that was fun. That was such a nice event and is a good way to see how you start your year. I've also heard wonderful things about Imagine RIT happening in the spring, so I'm looking forward to that as well. And there's going to be a lot of things happening between those two events. I know we'll have Brick City Homecoming coming up, and other events too. So I think really after a year, I'll have a better idea of what the rhythm is of this campus.
You'll have a sense of the pulse, how we breathe and move.
Right, exactly.
Now, before you moved to Rochester, did you get any advice from your friends about the winters here? Anything you'd share?
Not only friends from the DC area, but friends here too were all warning me about how the winters are, or I need to be ready for the winters. But I think people also forget that I spent 4 years in Boston. And I remember my senior year, there was snow pretty high on the ground in April. And I had to go to my swimming practice wearing a parka. And those days, really, I didn't want to get in the pool because the idea of being in the water and then going out in the cold was not ideal.
Have you done the polar plunge yet?
I have not. But it is on my bucket list and has been for a long time now. Often those events are also supporting different good causes. And one day I'll have to do one.
Now let's talk a little bit about the students. Do you have any advice for the newcomers to campus? Maybe they're nervous about college life?
It's funny you mention that because I met some of the SVP students and I was sitting down eating lunch with them and I asked what they were most looking forward to and what they were most afraid of. And they were talking about being excited to be here, obviously, but they were also worried about their time management skills, how they were going to manage their time, making sure that they had time to study while at the same time being able to take advantage of being a college student.
You're independent now, after all. You have to manage things for yourself.
Right, exactly. And what I've always told my students is I failed my first chemistry exam.
You did?
Yeah. And that really just punched me in the face. I mean, I failed my first chemistry exam.
Talk about a humbling experience.
Yeah, it was humbling for sure. And so I tell them, it was at that point that I realized what worked for me in high school was not going to work for me in college, and that was okay. And at that time, my parents had actually moved to Bulgaria, so I was really on my own. I only had my grandmother to call. And so I called her, and it was back then, so I called her on the TTY. And it was pretty rare, but my grandmother went to college, and she had majored in chemistry.
Amazing. You had this family mentorship.
Right. And that year, I remember I came home for Thanksgiving, and she handed me her chemistry book, which was pretty small. Now textbooks are huge. But it was a small book, and that was so nice to look back on her time. But she said to me, "Carrie, get a tutor." And never in my life had I needed a tutor. And she told me, "Go now." And you listen to your grandmother, right? So I walked myself over to the tutoring center and got a tutor. And that is when I realized that I wasn't catching the nuances in the classroom. I had my notes from class, sure. But the nuances of what the professor was emphasizing was or was not important, I was missing. The tutor was able to explain in the next test, I was the top 10%. And I tell that story to students all the time. I ended up getting my PhD in a science field after failing my first science exam. So lesson learned, and you learn from your failures. And I think you'll figure out your time management skills, but you also have each other to rely on. You can study together and all sorts of things. So really, it felt good to see students and to tell them that story.
I really like this question. So if you weren't in higher education, you weren't a teacher, where would you be?
I would be a National Park Service ranger.
Really? Do you have a park in mind?
Really, one thing. So during COVID, my family and I had a camper van, and we traveled the U.S. for 7 weeks. And during that, what I really loved about the national parks was the fact that it wasn't just about nature, but also about history and the combination of the two. And really, I've always been jealous of park rangers. They've explained to me what they do during the tours, and I've thought when I retire, I wouldn't mind being a ranger myself.
Okay, that's fun. I love that.
And another thing too, I saw an old professor of mine actually went on a cruise to Alaska. And I saw how my former professor of oceanography was giving a lecture on the cruise deck about glaciers. And I thought to myself, maybe someday I also wouldn't mind being on a cruise and being the person explaining to deaf passengers about the ocean or whatever the topic might be. But I think the teaching aspect of my life will never be gone. It would be part of me even if I wasn't an academic. And actually, I wanted to add too, I want the NTID community to know that yes, I've become president and I won't be teaching a semester-long course. However, I want them to know that they are more than welcome to invite me to their class, whether that be to give a guest lecture, just to come in for a discussion or a lab activity. I would be more than happy to come to the classroom. So please make sure that the NTID faculty know that.
You heard it here first, NTID community. Get Dr. Carrie Solomon for your class. Back to the fun questions. You're a former deaf Olympian. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, the first time I went to the Deaf Olympics, I was 13. I was a freshman in high school. And swimmers typically are fairly young athletes compared to some of the other sports.
Is there a reason for that? Are they healthier or?
Honestly, I'm not sure. But I remember at that time I was looking around me and I saw a lot of older athletes who were leaders. And I saw that and they were leading by example. They were captains of their teams and whatnot. And I remember seeing leadership on display, deaf leadership at its best.
At 13? Wow.
Right? And I was able to meet so many wonderful people through the Deaf Olympics, and many of them are still friends to this day. And then again, I was competing in Deaf Olympics as a college freshman. That was my second time. And at that time, it was hosted in Bulgaria, which was really cool because my family was already living there. So I flew over and my family was there. And they knew the best restaurants. They knew where to go. They knew everything about the place. Plus, my brother was already speaking Bulgarian at the time. And actually, he spent the whole sophomore year of high school there. And he was able to speak many different languages. And still to this day, he speaks 3 or 4 different languages. Sometimes we would have fun. The family would go on vacation. And, you might go to a tour and they would start in French and then German. And my brother would try to decide which language to interpret for me from.
Wow. That's pretty cool, honestly.
Yeah, so the Deaf Olympics really has a special place in my life. That's really where I felt like I truly met the deaf community. I went to the Delaware School for the Deaf, but it's small. And so going to the Deaf Olympics was like, yes, this is the deaf community.
You're there on the world stage. Yeah.
Right. I met many wonderful people, and again, still I see them on Facebook and at different places. Many have gone on to do many great things.
So because of your experience with Deaf Olympics, do you still watch Olympic sports?
Well, of course, as a swimmer, I am into the individualized sports. So anything like that, swimming, diving, gymnastics, track, any of the new ones like kayaking, anything like that, the individual sports.
A lot of aquatic sports.
Right, yes. But team sports? Well, I was more individual. My husband and my son are much more into watching World Cup soccer, football, things like that.
What's one thing the NTID community doesn't know about you?
I think it's that I love history. Everyone knows me as the scientist. But what they don't necessarily know is how much I have an appreciation for the humanities. One thing is, I was trained as a systematic thinker. I was trained to think about the system, how this impacts this and that impacts that. An even example for today with climate. The problems are also social problems. You have to talk to the social scientists as well in order to truly help solve that issue. And so it's really interdisciplinary. And that's what's exciting for me because that's how you try to solve the problems. You have to think outside the box. And I love learning different disciplines. I remember early on in my career, I had no idea what mixed methods was, qualitative and quantitative simultaneously, but I picked things up like that over time. And over time, it's made me much stronger and how I support people and how I recognize that they think differently because every discipline has something to offer.
I love that. It ties perfectly into my next question. If you could sit down for a conversation with any historical figure, alive or dead, who would it be and why?
I would love the opportunity to sit down with a woman named Annie Jump Cannon. Many people don't realize she developed the classification system for the stars based on the light wavelength. And she was deaf. And she was part of what they call the Pickering's women. That was at Harvard in the observatory. And now to this day, there's actually a scholarship named after her. The American Astronomical Society has a scholarship named after her. I would have loved to be able to learn from her what it was like to be a female scientist back then. I'm talking early 1900s. And I mean, the stars are things that you can't really touch. And so how did she figure out that classification system?
Yeah, very out there.
Yeah. And because it makes me realize, so people have asked me, well, you're a biological oceanographer, but why do you focus on viruses, bacteria, algae? Why are you interested in them? Because you can't really see them. And I think it's because it's like a black box. I can't see it, but I wonder. And I think for me, it's because of the food web. There's such a big impact, but from something so small. But now you think about the stars, it's out there, it's huge, and there's so much unknown.
Sounds like you're a very curious person, Carrie.
Yes, I am. And that's why the last 3 weeks have been great. I've been learning and listening to everyone about so many different things.
Might have to come up with a new name sign for you, Curious Carrie. What kind of legacy do you want to leave behind at NTID?
I think what I want to leave is having created more pathways for deaf and hard of hearing people in general, whether that be for employment, for leadership, and to have a lasting impact. Because one thing that we know as deaf people is that we see the world differently. And I think to be able to capture that worldview and then apply it to society and how we can contribute back to society and make that vivid, I would like to do that by the time I leave.
I'm very excited to see what you'll accomplish here and the impact you'll have.
Thank you.
Thank you for being with us today, Carrie. Do you have any last remarks before we close?
Really, I want to thank the community for being so welcoming. I really enjoyed my time with you over the last few weeks. I'm going into week 4 now, and I look forward to continuing that work with you.
That's great. Thank you for sitting down to talk with me today. I've been honored to have you here. Look forward to all that you'll accomplish. And thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.